Should we start us off? So Emma, so one of the questions we got given beforehand was, how do you prepare your organisation for the cultural and the people for that cultural change of going into the cloud?
Okay, so we were talking about this earlier actually, that quite a lot of the conversation in this room is around the technology change of shifting into the cloud, but my pet topic is around cultural transformation. And while I love technology, I understand that in order for us to make the most of cloud technology, we have to be ready for it. So something that I like to do with the clients who I'm working with as we start to plan out their move to the cloud is to think about, how do we as a group of people become ready? What is it that we need to become ready? And that often involves a little bit of organisational change, but mainly it involves raising awareness and some training. So educating people about some of the challenges, Franz, that you talked about earlier in terms of cost management and the difference in deployment mechanisms when you move into the cloud, educating everybody in your organisation around that. So we kind of mandate in our organisation that everybody has to have passed a basic cloud certification. Whether you work in HR or finance or marketing, you're expected to understand what it is to be in the cloud, and we find that really effective with our clients as well, because it brings in a base foundation of understanding.
Yeah, I would echo that. I was going to say this, it might sound bleeding obvious, but you got to get the right people. So for me, with our transformation, basically running a team of developers, was actually need to get some people in who really understand cloud, and it's those difficult to find DevOps type people, I think is where there's a big skills gap. The reason is running stuff in the cloud, you're still running applications, it's still servers, it's just somebody else's server in a data center. So you need people who understand applications, operating systems, networking, security, but they've also got the skills required to deploy infrastructure and software in the cloud. And it's all infrastructure as code. So those infrastructure type engineers also need to understand Git and Jenkins and things like that. And they're really difficult people to get hold of. And then there's got to be the right cultural fit, etc., etc. But when it works really well, because the development people learn more about infrastructure and the implications of the code that they're writing. The DevOps guys understand the application better and can take advantage of some of those things in the cloud. So yeah, people thing is the absolute first thing you've got to get right. If you don't start there, you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah. You got anybody? I think you're looking like you're sitting on a question over there. Yeah, no, yeah?
I'm far too shy at the moment.
Okay. Yeah.
I have a question. I think you have been talking about platform as a service and infrastructure as a service. And that's viable for organizations that have dev teams and DevOps teams. But what about those organizations that have only sys admins or dev admins and don't have development teams? I think, where do you see SaaS as coming into that cloud journey?
So can you just clarify, are you talking about, so you're buying in software and putting that in the cloud?
So all the solutions that I see here is platform as a service and infrastructure as a service.
Yes.
When you are moving to the cloud. And that's when you have DevOps teams.
Yes.
But there are organizations that don't have DevOps teams, and that's kind of within the culture. You were talking about the DB admin,
yes,
that Hydrant DB admin. It's the same thing. If you are going to the cloud, you need people with the right skills. And there are organizations that don't have those teams yet,
yes,
available. And probably that's where probably SaaS services like, I don't know, Jira or things like that fit into the organization. Where do you see that in the picture of moving to cloud? Or when is recommended for a company to move to a SaaS rather than a
on-prem software?
Yes, exactly.
Well, I have my views on it, but did you want to do that?
So, I think the two areas that Franz discussed was infrastructure as a service and a platform as a service. The platform, I think what you labeled as was things like the Lambda as a platform or a database as a platform. I think what you're referring to is a software as a service. So software as a service, once you have infrastructure as a service, the next layer is a platform as a service, and then on top of that, the software sits, which is in the cloud. So where Franz actually mentioned that you should try to get into platform, that includes I would say that includes the software. If you have a software as a service, which you can purchase and it's on the cloud, it will be more flexible, it will be more economical, and it will have all of the cloud features, benefits built in, if it fits your organization. A lot of time, people go with the platform or infrastructure because they want more flexibility or they have a bespoke requirement that cannot be delivered by the software as a service. So that's where, yes, if your model fits in the software as a service architecture, then yes, that would be probably the right decision to start with.
If I may add to that, so my view on that is, and I'm a little bit extreme on it, but I refuse to have any on-premise software at all, everything, and I've done that for about almost 10 years now. And the reason is I once had to write a business continuity plan, and that's painful when you have software and stuff. So my goal when we set up our business was that I wanted to be able to burn down our offices without it affecting anything. And the only way you can achieve that is by having everything in the cloud, and that means only buying software in the cloud. You get a whole bunch of other benefits, including resilience and all sorts of stuff. But quite literally, my business continuity plan right now says go and work from Starbucks. And that works.
And actually, you can use your cloud providers, exactly. SLAs, etc. So it makes it quite easy. It's kind of cut and paste, really. That's our business continuity. It's what theirs is.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was talking to somebody in the audience earlier around being in exactly the same situation where absolutely nothing that we have in our organisation is held on premise. Everything is a cloud tool that we either pay for by subscription or something we've built ourselves. That's all very well in an organisation which has grown organically in a world which knows about the cloud, but when you're working in a much larger organisation that have that legacy of on-premises applications, things they may have built themselves or paid a lot of money for a licence for, it's a much bigger ask to move to a fully cloud model. So something that I tend to see is that confidence gaining of take the first software as a service application. So maybe it's a Jira, for instance. Today I'm going to start using a cloud-based software that I'm not in control of. I'm going to pay somebody else to manage it for me. And that builds up confidence when you start understanding the subscription-based model, when you start understanding the ability to scale your licenses at the click of a button. And also, as you start adopting software as a service for things that you want to consume as a basis, it helps you learn about how you can apply those models yourself, and builds the confidence to start paying for servers in AWS or Azure.
Yeah, then it becomes the norm in the business.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
But it's a good first step to pay
Start
somebody
small,
else a subscription to use a piece of software.
Yeah.
That's a very good point, yeah.
And I think in a lot of cases we do use, a lot of organizations will have Office 365, which is an example of software as a service. So you already have that and it works.
Yeah. And the security benefits are phenomenal, by the way. So yeah. Okay. Have we got any other questions? Yeah.
When you went through some of the processes that you talked about, perhaps the fundamental process that you follow when going through the cloud, you mentioned that you're quite biased towards Azure. I mean, some of the other platforms that you're familiar with, would you agree with perhaps some of the fundamental ways, such as rather than using larger servers, multiple smaller servers? Does that resonate with kind of your experience with doing as well?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. So we're not Azure, we use AWS, but certainly smaller, more servers, because also that helps with the whole microservices kind of infrastructure, the way that you configure things through APIs, breaking apart big monolithic applications that run on massive servers, take away the web layer, and then that can auto scale a lot easier than when it's part of some big monolithic application. So it's that whole adoption into the cloud and using microservices. Because for most of us, we're trying to get a non-cloud native application into the cloud. And just lifting and shifting it, putting it on some massive server, you don't really get any of the gains. It's actually going to cost you more, as Franz said earlier. So that understanding your application and breaking it down into microservices is a key part of the migration into the cloud. And that's where, as I mentioned earlier, about the DevOps guys working with the development guys. So these guys understand the infrastructure and how that works and how you could scale. That gives the development guys an idea of how they start breaking these things apart, you know, using message queues and things like that. Yeah.
Well, the reason I think again is like you mentioned, scaling up is not an easy. That's difficult even in the cloud. And when you scale up, you have service interruption, you will have outages and things. So if you break it down into the smallest possible component, you can scale out rather than scaling up. And that's easy, and that's preferred method, and that basically gives you more resilience, more continuity, more reliability.
Absolutely.
I would also say, don't try and swallow the entire elephant in one go. Take your lowest risk, smallest thing first and get that running in the cloud. So for example, the migration that we've done getting our application running in the cloud, we've started with our development test environment, then we moved to a UAT one, and now we've got our customer demo thing running in Kubernetes in AWS. Because you learn by doing those things how it works, and it doesn't matter too much if your dev test environment fails the first time you deployed it in the cloud and you discover all kinds of things you didn't understand. You learn from that, but there's not a massive impact on the business. And that's the thing, is building the confidence as you go along as well, because it's not just technology thing, you know, it's people, and it's the rest of the business supporting you in your strategy is really, really important as well.
It helps you achieve buy-in. So where I talked about readiness, if you choose that simple example, which is a low-risk piece, and use it as your lighthouse project, where you get together a group of people who are ready to learn, and then from there you learn the lessons. You're going to make mistakes with the first one. You learn the lessons about cost management, about breaking down your monolith, and then from there, then you can start scaling out that pattern.
Somebody asked about, so which cloud do you use then? Which one is the best one? How do I go about choosing a cloud provider? So it's always the one, isn't it? So Cameron, what's your view on that?
I think choosing a cloud provider is not much different from choosing a data center where your servers will reside, because essentially a cloud will have a data center, an availability zone they call it, or multiple availability zone. They will have a location, so you look at the financial, the cost, basically, you look at reliability, you look at their support mechanism, you look at the product set, which is you do with any data center or service provider anyways. The more difficult bit, I think, comes into, do you have a real reason to go multi-cloud, or is one cloud enough for you? In most cases, single cloud is okay, but you may want to go multiple clouds. Some people fear with the cloud lock-in, and the biggest fear in there is basically the pricing. For example, if you locked into the Lambda on AWS, which is not compatible with any other platform, and if they change the prices, if they raise the prices up, you are locked in, you cannot move from there. So there's very niche special examples where you can actually, where you need multi-cloud, otherwise you are okay with the cloud. I think the biggest challenge or difficulty you should be thinking at the time is your strategy in terms of your recovery point objectives, your recovery point RTOs and RPOs, your availability strategy, your resilience, service continuity, and those things basically. And when you move into cloud, don't assume that it is all gifted and it will all work. Prepared for a failure. So whenever you move into cloud, you have to design the application with the lowest cost, basically, just to go for the smallest microprocessing system, basically, but design it for the failure. So be prepared. Whenever you move an application into cloud, you should be prepared for failure. So when you go for platform as a service, what the platform provider does is they will have multiple instances, multiple things at the same time. They will be patching the servers as well, but you will not see those. The servers will be going down, the disks will eventually do break and they do fail. That will be happening underlying, underlying infrastructure, but they have designed infrastructure that you will not see any outages. So even if you're managing your own application on infrastructure as a service, you should be prepared for the high availability, resilience, and the failure in the cloud. This is, I think, the main focus you should have when you move into cloud. But any cloud which is nearest to you, which is more cost effective, I think will be fine.
Yeah. You guys have anything on that one?
This is going to sound like I'm very opinionated and prejudiced, which I am. So my background is in Unix and Linux, so I naturally gravitate away from Microsoft. We use AWS. I've only been at the company for about 6 months, but my experience with cloud started with AWS. It's all very command line, so for me it's Unix, it's Linux, in which case it's good. So that's kind of why I've gravitated towards there. But I appreciate and can see how much Microsoft have caught up in the last few years and become a lot more Linux than they used to be. So that's a good thing.
And that's what I was going to say. The thing is, you go on Azure now, the default is Linux. You go and set up a new app service or something, it defaults to Linux. They bring out products on Linux first. Linux is cheaper than Windows on Azure now. Significantly cheaper.
An article, and they run more Linux.
They do.
And on Azure than Microsoft.
They do. And to be honest with you, it's because it makes sense for them. It increases their hosting density. It makes full economic sense. It's too expensive for them to run Windows. That's why they ported SQL Server to run on Linux. You know. So and on Google, flip side of that, on Google, but that does mean if you're using Microsoft, you have to use Azure, not at all. Google hired John Skeet to run there. So John Skeet is probably the foremost expert in the world on C#, the Microsoft programming language. And he works for Google and he runs their data center, the side of it that deals with the Windows provision and the Microsoft technologies. It doesn't really matter. It's what you guys say. Just choose the ones that have the right price. And also, don't forget, sometimes it's, to borrow a horrible American expression, it's about optics. Sometimes it's about who in your boardroom, which brand name do they like more. And that might be because they've read about AWS in an in-flight magazine, or it might be because they've been to a Microsoft thing and they like Microsoft. You know what? It doesn't really matter. All the clouds are pretty good. So whatever you can get through, is my opinion.
The only other thing I have to say on that is that if you're choosing and you've made some effort to break down your applications into smaller pieces, you have the opportunity to pick and choose. So maybe I want to go and choose Google Cloud for anything which processes large volumes of data because they have pieces which are specialist in doing that. And maybe I want to go and use Lambda because my developers are comfortable with that, so I use that from Amazon. There's nothing which prevents you from picking and choosing the specialist pieces. And the other thing is that we offer services for all of the big names of clouds. When we help our clients choose which one they want to use, it tends to be partly down to that boardroom conversation, but also partly down to where the cloud providers have their heads at present. So if you're about to start a big project on machine learning, a cloud provider is going to want to be interested in that, right? They're going to come and offer you incentives to use their cloud technology, price incentives, credit incentives, marketing incentives. So it's about being in the right place for the right conversation with the cloud provider.
Yeah, that's true. The other thing about the cloud providers is, so if you look at AWS and the number of services that they've got, it's amazing, a vast range of things. But the more of those that you use, let's just say you're using Lambda extensively, well, that's Lambda for AWS, which makes it a bit more difficult to just move it away and go and do stuff in Azure or in Google Cloud, because you might be using services that AWS provide that don't exist in the other clouds, and you've got this constant decision to make about, do I do some development myself to do that thing that AWS service does I could just sign up to? Because if I do it myself, at least I could move it to Google or Azure. Whereas if I do it with AWS and their service, I'm tied in more to AWS. It's a bit of a difficult...
But that's that cost-benefit thing.
But does it really matter at the end of the day? Actually, you know what? If you've chosen AWS, they've got lots of regions, lots of availability zones. If you're worried about availability for your application, actually, you're probably going to be okay. You don't need to worry that you're going to also do it with Azure or whatever.
And that's the thing, because you're right, with things like with Lambda and Azure Functions, because they give you so much out of the box. So you're right, literally 3 lines of code that does what was 50 lines of code if you wrote it any other way. And so it's that price offset. The one other thing, by the way, to look at their pricing structures, like with anything, is extremely complicated. You can go and do their pricing calculators online, but as soon as you're into volume, especially if you're buying in bulk, there are very, very substantial discounts to be had if you start going under the covers. So if you are buying more than a few thousand or more than £10,000 a year, or planning to, make sure you actually talk to a representative that can go and find out what price and deals you can get, because you could easily save 30-40% on the list price.
And just to add to that point, basically, so while you're choosing the cloud and migration, and the objective will be and everyone wants to move into cloud, and that's the preferred place to be. But you may, in some instances, have some applications, things like if a bank has a mainframe where all of the accounts data sits in your data center, in your offices, and you don't want to move that. You're not at the stage that you're ready. You can keep that, but you can move everything else in the cloud. So that will become a hybrid infrastructure where you still have on some of the on-premises data or function, but you can have the rest in the cloud.
Yeah, there we go.
So we've got an established customer-facing application in the cloud already on GCP.
Sorry, the recording.
And that's hosted out of Google's data center in Belgium. Roughly 10-12% of our customers are in mainland China, and they are not best bedfellows with Google. So has the panel any experience of hosting in China? Because our view is to establish a hosting on mainland, but synchronization across to GCP.
So, yeah, I'll try to answer that. So, Ali Cloud is, I would say, probably mirror of AWS catching up, which has a lot of presence. So, 70% of China's compute runs on Ali Cloud. And if they have started basically an office is in London, an office, and they already have presence in Germany. If you speak to them, they might be able to offer you some better alternative. They also actually help you engaging into the China businesses as well. So if you need some certification or some limited company formation, for example, that sort of things. So they have basically within the Alibaba infrastructure, they have a lot of those actually, so they could probably help you with that.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
One other option, so I haven't done it myself, a friend of mine has done it with the Azure. Azure has got Chinese data centers, but you can't just go and deploy to them. You have to have a business presence in China and stuff like that. But they have done it out of a UK company, but they've had to set up stuff over there. So it's, not that straightforward necessarily.
So we have a sub-organization in Shanghai, registered in Shanghai, so we have that local business presence.
Yeah.
And I take Cameron's point about Ali Cloud, and
Yeah.
we are in conversation with them. Any particular hints, or just talk to them and see how we go?
So one of the things that one of the representatives I was talking to, he mentioned that if you come up with any pricing, you think that this is what you are getting and offered by anyone else, they said, come talk to us, we can beat anything that you want.
Good.
But I think the main point I would go back to, so Ali Cloud, I think in a way it's good for someone who knows AWS, because the portal slightly looks different but works exactly in the same way. I was amazed to see their CloudFormation copy basically. So it looked like exactly graphical in the same way. But any cloud you go to, be prepared for failure. So design your application, the servers, the VMs or instances, even on the platform, they sit on some physical servers and the disks, which will eventually go down and fail. So when they fail, your infrastructure should be prepared actually to spin up another instance without causing any impact. If you are designed for that, in one data center, if the whole data center goes down, then you've got another availability zone. You should have some DR strategy, and that will keep you up and running. So you should always be prepared for that.
Anybody else? You know everything you need to know. Over there.
So we've hinted at multi-data center, multi-cloud deployments. And Mark, you made a comment about the infrastructure as code, the deployment as code. What does the panel think about the state of the art currently of deployment tools because we can build all these things. We can build them for Azure, for AWS, for LE Cloud, for whichever. We've still got to actually deploy them, move them around and scale them. And it feels like the tooling for that DevOps function is lagging behind to the developer tooling for I can get something up into the cloud easily from Visual Studio.
So I think you talk, so tools like Terraform, for example, has different providers. So you can write the same Terraform code, whether it's for VMware, for Azure, or for AWS. It's not exactly the same, but the structure is similar. And so then, in theory, I've not tried it, if you wanted to take that, some Terraform code you've written for AWS, should be relatively easy to port it and deploy stuff in Azure, for example. Because, you know, with AWS, for example, CloudFormation is the tool that you use to deploy infrastructure.
In terms of maturity, you're right, it is lagging behind, but I can see that organisations such as Pulumi that are trying to make it more accessible to do multi-cloud deployments of DevOps materials. So I'm a developer, I know that I'm going to need a server, or I know that I'm going to need some functions somewhere. Do I need to know where the server is or what type of functions? No, probably not. So there are tools starting to come out of the woodwork which make it easier. But Terraform, yes, in my experience, though, good Terraform code isn't as easy as I just run that on AWS and I'll run it over there on Azure.
Right, yeah.
You tend to find yourself crafting it for one cloud or another.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, and then, so you mentioned multi-cloud, and that's, I completely agree. If you're into the multi-data center thing, there's, I think that Azure is probably doing really well at the moment with the Azure DevOps deployment pipeline stuff, which, because it understands everything about Azure inside of the deployment pipeline, and we very frequently have things running in Amsterdam and Dublin, and then you just have tasks set up in the deployment pipeline that switches traffic between them and deploys them and stuff. And that's really, really easy with that one, because it's sort of baked into the whole ecosystem. But not multi-cloud, that's just multi-data center.
I think you will save actually in data transfer between the same providers' data center availability zones as compared to different cloud provider. There will be some data charges as well.
Hello. So sticking with the DevOps theme, as we know, we're moving things to infrastructure as code, and we're having to move towards more and more a DevOps culture to be able to deliver this and deliver. Do you have any further hints or tips to actually make people or enable people to come along on a journey and get involved in DevOps culture and embrace it?
That's my pet topic. So I've seen organisations go from entirely dev versus ops to what I would consider to be a mature DevOps culture. And to me, a DevOps culture spans the entire business, not just the people who thought they were infrastructure engineers and the people that thought they were developers. And the organisation where I saw that happen, it was a slow process of gently encouraging people to learn more. So you talked about developers who, it opens up your eyes as you start to learn about the cloud and about breaking things down so that you're using queues. It opens your eyes to the things that your operations engineers need to worry about and your support engineers used to moan about. So in that direction, blending dev and ops tends to help open people's eyes, and it builds much more of a community spirit when everybody's worried about the end user. Okay? But then I actually like to see the transformation that happens if you look more towards what the beginning of a software cycle would be, where you're helping people to understand how to take a concept through to production. And the more that we breed a culture where our sales engineers and our technical architects understand the challenges of a support engineer who's got to write the monitoring and the metrics and the graphs to spot what's happening, the better your software delivery or your service delivery will be on the other end.
And for infrastructure as a code, you do have to skill up yourself, basically. All of the teams will have to skill up. Things like that, there are a number of tools like CloudFormation is for AWS, Azure have their own basically, and Terraform is one of the open source that actually can be used for multiple clouds. But you have to, again, couple that with another configuration management tool, which they all integrate, they do work, they are getting there. I think I'd say they're pretty much there, 70-80% things you can deliver. There are some new features that cloud providers are releasing on day-to-day basis are not always actually found in those provider modules. But you can start to work on those now. And if you want to skill up, basically, if you have on-premises, maybe, for example, running VMware infrastructure or something, you could skill up your teams actually to do the same thing. The Terraform can run against the VMware environment, can run on any other cloud on-premises. You could start to develop those skills and see the transformation piece. If you could do this at the earlier stage, then the migration will be easier. But if you migrate, then there will be a bigger cost, basically, if you go like for like and then start to transform. So if you could build up some skills and do some transformation early stage, then it'll be better.
Yeah, and I think when people see how quick and easy it is to spin up infrastructure, entire environments, testing, developers can see the benefits of spinning up a system, a web app layer really, really quickly that they can run some testing of their code on, which used to take days and days, and they'd ask somebody else to do it. When they're working together in this DevOps team in a DevOps way, they can immediately see the advantages of doing it, and that's where the knowledge starts to spread as well. So it's not just about, when I mentioned, getting DevOps guys in the team, that's the kind of seed that then spreads around everybody else, and they work really well together. But it's seeing the immediate benefits of infrastructure and systems as code being spun up really quickly and easily.
I think I've got two crew tools that I use. The first one is make the pain felt where it's caused. So don't let developers hide away. If they cause bugs in production, get them in. They have to go and help fix it. They can't just say it's Ops' problem to do stuff. Make them feel the pain. And the second thing, if something is uncomfortable or painful, do it more often. If it takes 3 days to do a deployment and therefore you only do it 3 times a year, start doing it every month. Make that the business thing. Because two things happen. One thing is your team that are working on it, they're going to get really sick and tired of the pain. And your business managers are going to get really sick and tired of paying all of that money for all of that time spent. And then you start pushing it like that, and you just keep tightening the thumb screws on the release frequency. And the whole business eventually sort of gets dragged along and starts doing it. And before you know it, the tide flips and they're the ones pushing you forward.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's like anybody who's been woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning to fix an issue soon gets tired of that. So feeling that pain will actually focus you on making sure everything's scalable, supportable, the code's really well written, very, very well tested, because you don't want to get out of bed at 3 in the morning. But until you've felt that pain, it's...
My lead developers are all on the ping them alerts if their sites go down. Yeah. Anyway, any other questions? You just want to get another drink, don't you? Right, what time have we got? Okay. Well, anyway, I think we're all here, so we've got a little bit more and more networking. So just come and find us, or ping us. Certainly me, anyway. I'm sure I can say the same for you guys. Ping us online and find us. Yep. Always happy to talk about this stuff. Thank you very much. Great. Thank you.